Welcome to the Masons Podcast, your source of insight and innovation in New Zealand building and construction. Each episode explores the products, systems and solutions that support trades, specifiers and developers to deliver high quality, durable and efficient buildings across Aotearoa, New Zealand. From building envelope performance to flooring, acoustics and fire separation systems, we share practical knowledge and ideas that help shape the built environment.
Welcome to another episode where we dive into smart building solutions. Today we're talking about roof underlays, the unseen hero of every roof that sits quietly under the sheets or tiles, keeping your home dry, protecting insulation and helping your roof last longer. We'll look at how Masons Roof Underlays work, why they're important, and what you need to know to get the best performance from your roof. Welcome again, Arthur.
Welcome, Michelle. Thanks for having me back.
Great to meet with you again today. Can you explain to our listeners what is the purpose of a roof underlay?
Right, so a roof underlay, there's different types of roof underlay, absorbent and non-absorbent. So if we're talking about an absorbent roof underlay, which you would commonly find in most cold roof construction, homes, offices, schools, that sort of thing, we are looking at a product that has been primarily designed to absorb condensation and hold it for a time and then re-release it into the air in the roof space once the roof space starts to warm.
Okay.
That's its primary job. Secondary job is to act as a secondary drainage plane that sits behind the roof decking or roof cladding. So it's something that's not specifically recognised in standards, but it's strongly implied that that is its job.
Okay, so it basically keeps the water out, manages the moisture.
It helps get rid of any moisture that gets behind the roof cladding. It helps drain that away to the gutter.
Protecting your structure and just ensuring the roof performs well over time. And maybe just to clarify, can a roof underlay also be used as a wall underlay?
So that depends. Roof underlays and wall underlays, they're required to meet different attributes in New Zealand standards relating to underlays. In particular, a roof underlay has to have substantially more ability to absorb moisture than a wall underlay. So the answer to your question is that yes, in some cases, some manufacturers have products that will do both wall and roof. Others will have products that can simply do wall. As far as Masons is concerned, we have separate wall and separate roof underlays. We don't have one that does both.
Okay, thanks. And there seems to be a lot of different types of roof underlay on the market out there. Can you share with us what some of these might be?
Right. So in terms of roof underlays, the ones that people are most familiar with perhaps would be commonly called black paper. So that's bitumen-infused craft paper that's been used in New Zealand for a long time. A lot of installers and craftspeople really like it. There is still a bit of it about. It is gradually being phased out for various reasons. The other type that's very common now is synthetic roof underlay, typically multi-layer, made from polypropylene, manufactured in a non-woven way. Then you have your foils. So you have your pure aluminium and your aluminium composite foils, which are not absorbent. They're vapor blockers and they tend to be used in more commercial buildings, definitely not in residential homes or light construction. They tend not to be used there so much.
Okay, and I've heard the word felt out there as well. Where does that fit in?
Yeah, felt's not something that we'd see in New Zealand very often. It would be used in places like North America and Canada, often with regard to those bituminous shingle type products. It's a different kind of roof assembly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And where is the roof underlay situated in the roof assembly?
Right, so the roof underlay typically sits right underneath the roof cladding or roof decking and over the purlins.
It's kind of like a hidden shield directly under your roof cladding, catching the water, blocking wind-driven rain.
It's a pretty humble member of the roof assembly component list, I suppose. As I say, its primary job is to act as a reservoir for condensation. In cold roof design, of our previous pod, we've talked about condensation in cold roofs. We've talked about when that's sort of like catered for and when it becomes excessive. So an absorbent roof underlay's job is to absorb condensation and then to let it be released back into the air once the roof space warms. It does a number of other things too. It does act as a secondary drainage plane, especially if it's been installed well, lapped correctly. It separates the roofing materials from the support structure, whether that be steel or timber, and it also helps to stop air intrusion or air movement. It's pretty unlikely that air is going to get past a long run roof, for example. But also if you've got roofs that are more naturally air leaky, such as pressed metal tile roofs or concrete or clay tile roofs, an underlay just helps control that wind wash and air movement a little bit. It's a subtle thing.
So it's kind of primarily it manages the moisture in the roof space.
It's part of the secondary moisture management of a building.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Can we look at the roof underlay range that Masons supplies? Tell us about that. How many do you have?
Right. So in terms of absorbent breather type underlays, we have 4 VHP Value, which is our best priced sort of economy product. It is self-supporting but not fire retardant, and there's various roll sizes. VHP Strong, VHP Ultra, VHP Maxi, all fire retardant, all self-supporting, various roll sizes, and they range upwards in weight, in grams per square metre.
Great. Do you have anything in the way of a reflective foil?
We do. We have a Mason's white face foil, which is a composite, aluminium one side, bright white polypropylene on the other. That is a non-absorbent vapor blocking product. So when that's put into a roof assembly, there has to be quite a different consideration to like a typical cold roof design than a home or a school or an office or something.
Yeah, so you'd typically use that in what scenarios?
That would tend to go more in commercial construction, maybe large open sheds.
Yeah, okay.
Large open buildings where there might not be any lining blocking off the ceiling. You're looking for the reflectivity, the white light reflectivity from the white side. And on the aluminium side, the designer may or may not be building in the ability for it to reflect back infrared, part of the overall design for the insulation, contingent on the design.
Okay, so just to summarise, you've got 4 breathable products there.
Right.
They increase in weight and durability, starting at the low end with VHP Value, moving up to VHP Strong, Ultra, and finally Maxi, which is your extra heavy weight premium underlay.
Yeah, I'll just say on durability, they all have to meet the same durability criteria, which is they have to last the life of the roof, basically, 50 years or the life of the roof, whichever occurs first. So the durability is the same for all of them. In fact, white face foil as well. But I think what you're perhaps referring to is like their attributes, their strength and those sorts of things, robustness.
Yeah, okay, thanks for pointing that out. Tear resistance?
Yes, well, they all have passed mechanical strength, edge tear, tensile strengths. After they've been exposed to UV, we look at see what sort of changes has happened. So they've all passed that. So like all of these modern synthetic underlays are pretty tough. In terms of resistance to tearing and that sort of thing, they're very, very good. People pretty much have to go out of their way to puncture them or tear them.
Okay. And I suppose it also depends on how taut you should pull it on the installation, how tight it is. You don't want to over-tighten it.
I really don't hear of any difficulties with people installing these in terms of tearing them when they're installing them normally.
Okay.
And yes, they do need to be installed taut, but not over tight. You're not trying to stretch it like a drum skin. You just want it, sensibly tight.
Okay. And would wind zone have anything to do with the type that you might select?
So yes and no. It would come down often to the roofer's preference.
Okay.
Some people may prefer a heavier grade, like say Maxi or VHP Ultra, because the roofers find that more comfortable to handle. It's a heavier, thicker product, and so you can imagine yourself trying to throw a cover over your trailer. If you've got a light, flimsy one, and so the wind gets up, it's going to be almost impossible to manage, whereas a heavier product, slightly easier to manage.
And what about some of these terms that are used when describing underlays, like self-supporting? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, self-supporting. It means that it's passed the test to basically support its own weight over a 1,200 millimetre span. Another way of looking at it, it's when it's been tested, it's rated as R4, mechanical strength of R4 or self-supporting. In real terms, that doesn't mean that it's self-supporting in every situation. You know, if the roof pitch is below 10 degrees, and depending on whether the product is installed vertically or horizontally, very likely, almost certain that you're going to need a mesh or something else to support the underlay. Right. And what we're trying to do is keep the underlay in close relationship to the roof decking, roof cladding. We've talked about the secondary drainage plane. If we have too much sag, we could potentially get ponding and pooling, and we want that to, it's generally acknowledged that we do want it to act as a secondary drainage plane.
Yeah, for sure. And what about breathability, another term that they use when describing underlays?
Breathability refers to the ability of the underlays to pass water vapour. and is tested for and at a rate that it must meet or exceed to meet New Zealand standards. That is for the polypropylene non-woven synthetic underlays. The foils do not pass water vapour. They are not breathers. They are vapour blockers.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Fire retardant. And where would we generally use that?
So fire retardant, what happens is during production, various things are added to slow the ignition, slow the spread of flame, production of smoke, and to reduce the amount of flaming droplets. One of our products is not fire retardant. That's VHP Value. It's the old story. If you want to save cost or save price, you sometimes have to take a feature out. So fire retardancy, they're measured, the underlays are measured according to standards. They get a rating on the flammability index, and they have to be 5 or below to be called fire retardant. So VHP Strong, Ultra, and Maxi, and Mason's whiteface foil are all classified as fire retardant.
Okay.
Now, you asked me where they would be used. It's sort of become really common in our industry now for people to specify fire retardant underlays, both wall and roof, most especially around fire separations or firewalls. Now, it's one of those things where that's common now, it's widely accepted. People think that, I'm not sure if they think that's just best practice or if it's like required, but the New Zealand Building Code does not require fire retardant underlays unless they're exposed to people. So in other words, if you're walking down a corridor and the ceiling wasn't lined and you could see the roof underlay, that has to be fire retardant.
Sure.
Per code. Same with a wall. However, if it's in a space that people will not occupy or use or pass through, you could have a non-fire retardant underlay and an unlined roof.
So the use of that could be more like in a commercial scenarios.
In terms of fire retardant product, almost everybody specifies fire retardants in most situations.
Yep.
But it's not required if the space is completely closed off to humans. In other words, it's an unlined roof.
Yep.
Humans are not going to be up in that space. It's fine to use VHP Value, which is a non-fire retardant product.
Great. Thanks for
That's what I'm trying to explain.
Yeah,
Yep.
Okay. So these terms, in short, they describe the underlay's strength, safety and moisture handling capabilities.
Calling the product a breather underlay means that it will pass water vapour, that it's self-supporting. Yes, it has to meet a certain measure of tensile properties. And fire retardancy, it has to meet the requirements on the flammability index.
How about correct installation? Is there anything special or anything people need to keep in mind when installing these underlays?
So nothing special. They're installed pretty much the same as most other roof underlays. We would encourage people to go to the manufacturer's instructions. In our case, that's at mpb.co.nz. Search for VHP roof underlay or whiteface foil, and you will find the specific instructions there. They are pretty much in line with New Zealand standards for how you install underlays. So you run them over the roof purlins or the roof framing. You pull it taut, not over tight. Mesh where appropriate. Pitches under 10 or 8 degrees, take your pick. If it's run horizontally, then start at the bottom and there's a 150 millimetre lap. The layers above the first layer need to be lapped at least 150 millimetres, and you work up the roof that way. Fixings usually at 300 millimetre centres, and they are either staples, they might be a flat head clout, or there could be a proprietary roof paper fixing, bang on type of fixing. I'm not sure if those things are around. I'm trying to think of what they're called, but they're like a little strip of metal fixings that you bang onto your underlay. Vertical underlay installation does happen sometimes, and you will look in our instructions or pretty much the New Zealand standards, and they will tell you where you require support and where you don't. You've got to make sure you leave the right gap around hot flues.
Okay.
And other penetrations to that roof underlay are sealed up because we do want it to catch a bit of moisture and let that drain down to the gutter line. So to do that, you don't want it dropping out onto the roof where someone's put a pipe through or a vent or something like that.
Makes sense, yeah. And of course, put it printed side out.
Yes, printed side out. In our underlay especially, we can only speak for ours, that's where the UV resistance is. Mm-hmm. So we want to see that printed side out, which will be like an off-white, light greyish to reduce glare.
Perfect. Okay, if we briefly just review again the names of the Masons breather type underlays so everyone's familiar with each of them and understands their differences.
Yeah. VHP Value is our economy product. It is not fire retardant. It's a big upgrade from using your traditional bituminous craft paper, in our opinion anyway. It's available in a range of sizes. VHP Strong, fire retardant, self-supporting. VHP Value is self-supporting too. Huge range of sizes, including 3-meter wide rolls for fast installation on low pitches, and valley rolls, convenient valley rolls, pre-cut valley rolls. VHP Ultra is a heavyweight paper. It is sort of sits in between some of the other underlays out there. Some people don't understand where it sits. A few people have clicked on and absolutely love it. Just a really good high-performance product at a fair price. And VHP Maxi is the top of the tree, much beloved of architectural designers and that sort of thing. Really, all of our products are very competitive, and yet they carry a CodeMark certificate of conformity, which you have to work really hard to get and to keep these days, which is as it should be. So they are high-quality products.
And they've all been appraised for use in New Zealand and compliant with the code?
The CodeMark certificate of conformity confers automatic acceptance under the New Zealand Building Code.
Perfect, okay. Is there anything else that Masons sell that go into a roof assembly?
If some people have listened to previous pods, they'll know that we offer a passive roof ventilation system, largely comprised of ventilated battens, and there's also a spacer at the eave, we call insill baffle. We also have roof boots, which are a kind of a waterproof flashing for the exterior of the roof cladding. We sell blue wrap strap. It's probably not commonly used to support roof underlays, but in certain situations that's acceptable and in the building code. It's an alternative to mesh.
Okay.
Those are the ones I can think of at the moment. And of course, we have the white face foil.
Tapes?
Well, yes, that's right. So very occasionally lap sealing is called up. So we have the 40 below range of high-performance acrylic adhesive flashing tape, and that can be used to seal laps in certain scenarios. I mean, if it's a foil underlay that's been designed, then you need a vapor blocking flashing tape as well, and we would recommend our 40 below platinum, which is a complete vapor blocker.
Great, okay. Are there any common questions that roofers generally ask about your roof underlays?
Yeah, funny you should ask. So the most common question I get in conjunction with roof underlay is, does the underlay above a fire separation or a firewall need to be a fire retardant underlay? As mentioned earlier, it's become accepted and common practice to use a fire retardant underlay above a fire separation or a firewall because it does no harm and because there's plenty of fire retardant underlays available. Is it absolutely required? No. And does it make much difference to the fire separation or the spread of fire or, what would happen in a conflagration with that building? I guess is getting to the realm of opinion. Let's just say this is Arthur's opinion. It's not going to probably make that much difference.
No.
But let's be honest, if a designer has called up a fire retardant underlay above a fire separation or a firewall, let's just do what the designer has specified. It can't do any harm.
It's not going to do any harm. We know that most of the work is done by the cladding and sealing of that wall.
Well, if it's a firewall or a fire separation, there will be fire seals and a whole bunch of design features around that. The fire retardant underlay underneath the roof cladding or behind the cladding, if it's a wall, doesn't have a big part to play.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of got to be careful here because I'm not a fire engineer or a building designer. So I just have to be mindful of my limitations.
Okay, no, that's great. Thanks for that, Arthur. Is there anything else that people should think about when selecting or choosing a roof underlay? For example, what about compatibility with other components, how this could affect warranties on the building?
Yeah.
What if roof underlays are mixed and matched?
Well, let's pick those apart. So first of all, if we're talking about the VHP range of underlays, the material they're made of is pretty much compatible with all common building materials. So in terms of like treated timber, no problem. Aluminium or painted Galvalume type products, no issue whatsoever. The same with fixings. All of those things are just not an issue.
Okay.
White face foil, because there's an aluminium foil side of it, there can be considerations, especially if that's going to be exposed to corrosive elements such as an industrial setting. Maybe it's fertilizer, maybe it's amino acids, might be salt spray. So there are some things to consider, and we give advice on that in our design and installation manual.
Okay.
It's not a big stress, but it does have to be thought through. All of these underlays, especially if there's polypropylene involved, will be susceptible to UV degradation. And so the whole industry has recently given advice and tried to be as clear as possible in our documentation about where and where not to use a polypropylene-based wall underlay. Okay. So that's something that designers haven't, if they haven't caught up on that, or builders, check with the manufacturer of choice, check on our website, have a look at our advice. There are advised restrictions now on using these underlays in buildings where they're going to be exposed to UV light over the long term.
Great. Okay. Good explanation. Thank you.
And what were the other things that you mentioned? Mixing and matching?
Mixing and matching. Not that this would commonly occur, but I guess it could happen in some.
In terms of compatibility, if they're all non-woven, polypropylene, synthetic underlays, if you've got a whole rolls of masons and somebody needs to use up a couple of rolls of something else of a similar grade, similar fire retardancy and all that sort of thing, it wouldn't concern us. The building inspector might have some questions. There could be some concerns over warranties, but we're pretty charitable about that sort of thing. However, if you're mixing, say, you're using up some old craft bitumen paper and synthetic underlay, it's not likely to be a problem, but we'd probably be a bit concerned about that. And you definitely wouldn't want to be mixing foils and synthetics if you can avoid it.
No. Okay, let's talk cost versus performance. Spending a little more on a high-performance underlay can save money long-term by reducing condensation cost and extending the roof's life?
So fundamentally, let's divide it into the VHP range of breather-absorbent, non-woven synthetic underlays. They all have to meet the same standard in terms of being able to absorb condensation. Some of the products perform significantly better than others, but they all meet or exceed the minimum standards. Yes. So there is no real difference. You could say there's no real difference there. These breather and absorbent underlays, their job is to act as a reservoir for condensation and cold roof design. However, if there are other factors in that building, it wouldn't matter whose underlay you used or what grade. Sometimes they become overwhelmed and there are condensation problems that the underlay can't resolve by itself.
Sure.
It obviously comes down to budget, and if builders or designers are trying to turn out a affordable home that meets all the standards, our least expensive product is going to more than meet the requirements and provide everything that roof needs underlay-wise at a very acceptable price. So condensation, of course, we've dealt with that in previous pods, and it's a subject in itself, and it may well need design and some additional features to the roof design to deal with that.
Great, thanks. How do underlays tie in with other things that might be used in the roof, such as PIR, insulation board, and other types of loft insulation?
Typically, the roof underlay is sitting up at the roof cladding or roof decking level and would really only come into anywhere near the bulk insulation down at the heel of the truss or the heel of the rafter where we're getting close to the eave, and we might have this thick, bulk insulation. We want to keep the underlay separate, so there's an air path and they're not touching. There are spaces that can be put in. Ours is called insul baffle to hold those apart. Some builders and some designers may choose a 500 millimetre wide section of 90mm PIR board to put around the perimeter of the ceiling so that you get really good insulation value, but you've got your airway open and there's no touching of the underlay and the bulk insulation. So there's various ways to skin the cat.
That's a clear explanation.
And probably PIR board and insulation, that's probably another pod or maybe another 2 or 3 pods.
Fair call. Okay. Lastly, where can people find support information such as installation instructions, installation advice, and further information about these products? Okay,
so if you want information on the Masons VHP Roof Underlay range or Masons Whiteface Foil, please go to our website, which is mpb.co.nz, and look for roof underlay and accessories. If you want general advice on installing roof underlays, including some really useful information, please search for the Metal Roofing Manufacturers Code of Practice. If you haven't already signed up, you can get a free version. It's incredibly informative. I can't recommend it highly enough. So those are the 2 things that come to mind.
Yeah,
there's also really great information. Brands publish a lot of really great information, especially if people are studying up, DIY, people who are thinking of building or want to go to their designer and their builder and feel informed. I can't recommend enough the articles that brands have put out over the years, which are free to access.
Yes, yeah, perfect. Okay, well, that's a wrap on roof underlays.
A wrap on roof underlay.
Excuse the pun, I had to throw that in there. Remember, the right underlay installed correctly can save you a lot of headaches down the track. Thank you, Arthur, and thanks to our listeners for tuning in. And we'll catch you next time for more building tips and insights.
Thanks for listening to the Masons podcast. We hope you've gained some practical insights and ideas for your next project. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and visit us at mpb.co.nz for more information on our product systems and solutions. And join us next time as we continue to explore smarter ways and solutions for building in New Zealand.
This podcast is for general information only. While we aim to provide accurate details on building products and systems, Masons is not liable for reliance on this content. Always follow product specifications, manufacturer's instructions, and relevant building codes.